So I can't escape the notion from the presentations we've just had that cars are changing very rapidly, and yet cars aren't changing very slowly. Okay, we only have a very small turnover, and it's something we were, these two gentlemen and I were discussing before the panel, that there is a radical shift going on. The last speaker talking about data sharing among cars and collecting that probe information and sensor data really is an extraordinary value proposition, and I love the final statement, don't ask what the map can do for you, ask what you can do for the map. I think that really solidified a very powerful message. But we're talking about digital branding. So all this talk about data and connectivity leads to a very different relationship with the car and with the brand, and that's the basis for this conversation, although it's perhaps a little bit philosophical maybe, but we'll try to make it as concrete as we possibly can. So if we could David, introduce yourself first and your sort of perspective that you bring to this conversation.
Yeah. So, hi, my name is David Kohlberg. I'm the head of product management at Wireless Car. And I started out working with software, and then I've done product management and product marketing for the last 10 years. And as head of product management at Wireless Car, basically, Wireless Car is a connected car services provider. And my main focus is how can we assist OEMs in creating services around the car and helping them evolve their brand and their offerings to their customers.
But you had a unique perspective on what you thought digital branding really meant, because that's a pretty, ambiguous concept, amorphous. What does that mean to you?
I agree. I think the foundation, sort of the key part of my perspective is how do OEM brands need to change from where they are right now to where they offer something in sort of a mobility as a service world, or if we combine the physical car with services, wrap that in data, artificial intelligence, and so on. How do the brands need to actually change to accommodate that?
I'm going to have to push you a little further because you made some other comments in our conversation earlier about reaching beyond just the people who own a given brand's vehicles, right?
Sure. I think the key is really to go, like you're saying, beyond the people who own the cars, onto how do you provide value for everyone else, and how can you not only sell the physical item, but combine that with services and potentially just provide services under the OEM brand. Is that what you were thinking about?
Kind of a mobility as a service, vehicle on demand, things of that nature.
Sure, yeah.
So, Tony, please introduce yourself and how you come to this conversation.
Yeah, I asked myself as well. Monday morning is not my best time, to be honest with you, especially not to be philosophical about branding. Tony Douglas, I work for BMW. I do the Park Now, Charge Now, Reach Now, and Charge Now services from the BMW side. So I think there's two different areas here. One is every OEM has got to be relevant in the digital world. In fact, I would question the question, there's no such thing as an analog brand today. Everyone's digital, whether you want to be or not. The question is, how do you manage it? And do you want to scale it or do you want to grow it? And there's a difference between growing and scaling. Most digital brands scale very, very fast. Didi, Ubers, Lyfts, and so on, they scaled incredibly fast, much faster than any OEM expected. Yeah? So that's one thing. The other thing is we launched 4 new brands to be relevant in that space very quickly. So
which 4 brands are you talking about?
Park Now, Parking, Charging, Charge Now, Drive Now, which is car sharing, and Reach Now, which is car sharing and ride sharing together. They scale very, very fast.
Okay.
Most digital players, if you want to be relevant, they have an almost infinitely scalable business model. And this is the challenge for a lot of OEMs, is how do you scale and be relevant in the digital age?
So I think when you talk about scale, and I think we just heard it from VW, that you need to have kind of a platform, I think the word is, and we heard a little bit of that talk. He was talking about launching apps and capsules and things of this nature. Do you find yourself at Wireless Car interacting with car companies who are trying to build a platform, and what does a platform mean for an automaker from your perspective?
Yeah, I think platform, we interact with a lot of different OEMs, and they have both different perspectives and different maturity when it comes to sort of providing digital services. And
I'll be a little bit more aggressive. Are there any car makers, as you look out over the landscape, just to put you on the spot and maybe cost you some business, are there any car makers you would point to today that you would say, oh yeah, they actually have a platform? Does any car company today have a platform,
we need
a
to
scalable
define,
platform?
I think we need to
Tony's
define
point?
what platform actually means. I mean, you can think about a software platform, for example, but you can also think of it as a service platform, where you basically look at what type of services do they provide. So I mean, for example, looking at BMW, I mean, you have your mobility brands where you branched out. Volvo Cars, for example, they are doing the Sun Fleet car sharing. Obviously, Daimler has a variety of various brands. So I would define that as their platform, and I would say yes.
Okay, I'll dig a little deeper. So how long was it ago, 8, 10 years ago, that Wireless Car was working very closely with BMW on the next generation telematics platform? The P changed, I forget what the P stands for now, but let's say it's platform. Mm-hmm. And that was a vision from quite a long time ago that looked very similar to the kind of vision that VW was talking about, where there's some flexibility to switch out partners and to be increasingly agile. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when you jump into bed with a car company, it isn't necessarily a 4 or 5 year relationship necessarily. Mm-hmm. Has NGTP evolved, and does it have a role to play in this platform era that we're trying to move into?
It has for sure evolved, and currently what we're seeing and what our customers want, OEMs, basically they want a platform where they can partner, exchange partners really quickly, and deliver services which haven't even been thought of at this point in time. So what we are looking to provide is platform. There are many levels of platforms here, and when we talk about the platform that Wireless Car provides, that's a back-end off-board platform for providing whatever type of connected services that, let's say, an OEM can dream up. And we see that being both traditional telematics services, but we also see applications for autonomous cars or car sharing or fleet capabilities. So what we are doing right now is generalizing that platform so that we basically provide a foundation to OEMs to provide anything that the future can bring out.
So BMW was adopting that, and I think they
so
still...
BMW is not a customer at this point.
No, I understand that. I understand.
I'm
just speaking generically, but BMW promoted this, promulgated this idea in the industry, and I think Nissan also adopted this, and anybody else?
So Nissan is a customer. We have, on our website, we have
don't have to
Nissan,
name your customers.
Daimler.
Okay. But companies that have adopted this philosophy of NGTP, that's what I'm driving at.
So I think this is an evolution of NGTP,
TP.
And right now, we're really looking at being able to do that more generically and being able to open it up to a larger extent.
Okay. So BMW, from a branding perspective, when I look at BMW, I see an architecture, a platform being built, but I don't see a core brand. I know that may sound strange, but like a mobility brand that takes sort of all the pieces of the organization into account is what I'm kind of driving at. Like if I see Drive Now, Reach Now, I'm not necessarily associating that with BMW. So, and BMW Assist, which would be the equivalent of OnStar, sort of is, nothing really is being done with that brand. So what are the decisions being made about brands and platforms?
I think it's important to separate the brands. You have people for typical OEM business is I own the car, and then there's a bunch of brands that are basically about usage of the car. So historically, to be honest with you, it's been one customer, one car, one parking spot. That's been our business model. And you're now moving into the on-demand mobility, so people have access to one car. So what you're effectively doing is you're selling one car 1,000 times. And that's a completely different business model than the OEM business model. So it made a lot of sense to launch new brands for these services. I'll pick out a couple of examples. So who uses the service Drive Now, for example?
Anybody here use Drive Now?
Not a lot of you, because you're car guys. Okay, you own them. Yeah?
Yeah,
But,
to be clear,
to be honest with you,
research shows that car sharing users, more than 50% of them, significantly more than 50% of them, do not own cars.
but they all use them. And who uses Park Now, for example? Who's Parking Now? There's a couple
Anybody
of guys
using
here
Park
about
Now?
And I'd be pretty stupid to just offer Park Now services just for BMW customers. I want everyone to use that parking service.
But you would
So I
want
wanna
BMW customers to use it,
I want
though.
to use them as well. But I've only got, what have I got? About 20 million BMWs running around on the roads. That's not enough to run the parking business. I want everyone using that parking
Okay,
service. So
okay.
it makes a lot of sense to call it Park Now instead of a BMW Park, because then I'm addressing a much larger
So
customer
then,
group.
to bring it back to the topic at hand,
Digital.
is digital branding a way to expand that envelope and corral customers towards the main brand, the central brand?
We're not there yet, but you're going to see that happen. So you're going to get the usage. I mean, we would call it a user and an owner. But to be honest with you, most customers are both. They own stuff and they use stuff. And you want to get those two worlds moving together. So that's what we're going to do. The other thing we'll do is you'll see the parking and the charging business and the ride-sharing, car-sharing business. They will come together. So, but there's no point, and I call it the Star Alliance of Mobility. There's no point in offering a Star Alliance if you've only got one aeroplane. Yeah, you need a few more aeroplanes. So let us build those aeroplanes and the customers, and then we'll get the Star Alliance going. Yeah.
And I believe, well, so we talked about how you said Porsche has the top downloaded app,
Yeah, it's one of the most popular rated apps.
but you couldn't tell me what it does.
No.
Okay.
Has anyone got the Porsche app on the phone?
Does anybody have the Porsche app?
So that's another point, actually. If you want to be digital, how relevant are you if no one's got your app? And it's not just got the app, but is it actually on the front grid of your smartphone? So I would question, is an OEM really in the position to be on the front grid of a smartphone and be used 2 or 3 times a day? I don't think so. I think you could do parking maybe 2 or 3 times a day, maybe charging, but I'm not too sure how often you really want to chat to your car as an owner.
Well, it seems to me that a car company must have an app presence today. There's just no two ways around it. Are you running into this in the conversations you're having with car companies?
Absolutely. But I think if I'm a little bit forward-leaning in this discussion, I think being a digital brand, and I think taking sort of that crucial step forward is all about not only thinking about the car and thinking about apps. It's basically thinking of the car and what you provide as a combination of hardware and software. So it's both hardware, software, and services, not only executing on the actual physical hardware in the car, it's combining it all together.
I agree, David. We talked about this earlier on. I actually think there's a huge opportunity because at the moment, if I change my smartphone from an Apple, say it's an Android, there's a lot of pain. If I actually change my car, there's very little pain. And I think most digital players, they get it right. They create an ecosystem where it's a joy to stay and a pain to leave. And I think we have to work in this area in terms of how do I make it a joy to stay with a platform, either a user or owner. But I think we have to wake up there because the next generation will expect it. My son, for example, is 21. He has one-click access to everything. And I mean that. It includes girlfriends. And that's what he expects. And he expects one-click access to mobility and everything else. And I would question, is he really prepared to go through the pain of trying to purchase a car today? I don't think he is. He expects one-click access to everything. And that means impact on insurance, that means impact on the finance industry, that means impact on the whole retail setup and everything else. So I think we should wake up. If we want to be digital branded, we should really match the expectations of what the digital generation expects. And he expects the same seamless premium experience that he gets with Netflix today.
So there's a couple of issues. One, I'm not sure we have all the consumers bought into connectivity, so that's a requirement. All cars are going to be connected, which is going to turn us into fleet operators. We want every customer to opt into data sharing. I'm not sure we've closed that loop necessarily, and dealers play a critical role there. So how are we going to cross this digital divide, if you will, to getting everybody on board, connected, sharing data?
I see it more as an opportunity where basically everything else, not everything, but a lot of things in our society have already moved into this fully connected sort of on-demand world. So I think it's more a matter of the opportunities there, the technology is there. It's all about combining it with our actual hardware and taking the automotive industry into that sort of on-demand economy. So to me, it's not a matter of what are the things we need to do. It's just a matter of figuring out what is both the brand positioning of the OEMs and what does the user experience look like. And whoever sort of figures that out first is going to have a huge advantage.
Well, one of the worst experiences is buying a car, to your point. I mean, the mountain of paperwork, and I'm sure it's the same here. As
That's the opportunity, figuring that out, how that can be sort of a pleasurable
Is anything
experience.
happening there to...
I think you'll see, again, back to the owner world versus the user's world. So today, if you want to register and use mobility for a reach now, for example, in Seattle, it's a pure digital experience. You just take a photograph of your credit card, your smartphone, a photograph of your ID, and then a short video to show you're alive, and you're registered. So that is done in the time it takes to pick up a Starbucks, 30, 40 seconds.
I don't have to wait 24 hours? Because with Chevy's Maven, you have to wait 24 hours.
No, you don't. There's the credit check in the background, but you're going to see that happening, and that's going to force, I think, the owning model to
But now
change.
you mentioned that the customer support calls are for some surprising things.
Yeah, I think everyone's talking about the autonomous and on-demand and next wave and so on. And people kind of forget some basics. So when someone jumps into a car and just wants to go, he just wants to go in and drive. And when we launched Drive now 6 years ago in Munich, actually the highest number of calls we had coming into the call center was people sitting in the Mini saying, how do I open the window? So what I'm saying is if you get into the on-demand business, you have to make sure that the whole MMI and user interface for your car is probably got to be much more intuitive and simpler than it is
particularly
today.
because these people are not car owners.
Yeah, they're just jumping in and want to use. So it's slightly different use cases going on. Yeah.
Is there an opportunity? How much of an opportunity is there, how much validation has there been to the idea that making cars available to people who don't have cars or don't think about using cars every day, that it might actually convert these people into car owners?
Yeah, it's not black and white. I mean, there's the typical split we're seeing is a third of the people actually own a car that use these on-demand services. A third of the people have access to maybe friends and family a car, and then a third don't actually have any access to a car whatsoever. But what happens when you get on-demand mobility, and you can always get access to mobility, people enter a world of mobility of choice. So traditionally, people have said, I'm a bus guy, I'm a train guy, I'm a car guy, and now you're entering a world of choice, and people are basically mixing and matching. And that's what you're seeing. People are actually, the integrator's already there. It tends to be a smartphone, whether it's the bus service, train service, or whatever, car service. The customer's choosing what mode of transportation he wants to use. So you're entering a world, mobility in a world of choice, and that's not going to go away. You're going to see also one of the main drivers is all about urbanization. There's just not the space to scale. One customer, one car, one parking spot. I don't know how many people are here with a car today. Quite a lot, I presume. Anyone with a car today here?
Car.
With a car, yeah. I know what your car's doing now. It's parked. That's what it does all the time, to be honest with you. Another thing, so back to your question about digitalization. If you look at our business through the eyes of a pure digital disruptive player, you see a high-value asset like 100,000 euros for a car, and it's sitting there 96% not being used. And anyone with half the mindset of an Airbnb is going to say, I want to drive that utilization of that high-value asset. So that's what the digital players will do. They'll look at a low utilization of a high resource and then drive that utilization. So you could liken our business to be a bit like a hotel business, but 96% of the time the rooms are empty. You would say, actually, you're a bit crazy. But it's not, actually. That's what people are looking at.
Now, okay, so one of the things you're up against in terms of upping that utilization is the fact that while car sharing is a lovely opportunity, and Germany is one of the market leaders in the world with car sharing, many towns have shareable cars in them, so very much in the forefront. Canada might be close, and the UK is certainly very active, but Germany is uniquely focused around this car sharing idea, but is very hostile to Uber, Germany is. Unfortunate given the name, but anyway, My Taxi is the dominant, alternative for an app, and yet My Taxi is basically just the regular taxis, just appified, if you will. And That ride-hailing app phenomenon is a pretty compelling use case. I mean, it just overwhelms the car-sharing value proposition. So what is the thinking about that? I know in Seattle, BMW is putting drivers into the Drive Now, Reach Now cars. Are you doing the same thing here? How are you? It seems like BMW is grappling with this idea that it's very compelling, the ride-hailing.
So you're right. The difference between taxis,
which, by the way, does away with the need for parking.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, so even the autonomous car is going to have to park as well. So you're going to see digital. What digital does is drives a horizontal through all verticals. So the difference between ride-sharing, car-sharing, taxi business, rental business, that'll disappear. That's just historical. The fleet in Seattle for Reach Now, for example, you can rent a car. You can rent it with a driver or without a driver. The car comes to you because the driver drives the car to you. You kick out the driver and drive yourself, or the driver stays in and you carry on driving. So you're going to see.
What are you doing here in Germany?
Just let me finish the story here. This is a good one. And you're seeing the same thing happen in Didi as well. So what happens is you actually got on the streets today what I call manual autonomous driving. The use case is exactly the same. The artificial intelligence is the driver. He's actually quite intelligent, believe it or not, yeah? So the use cases for autonomous driving are already there today. What happens when you've got the artificial intelligence is your cost structure goes way down. So 80% of the cost can be the driver. If the driver's not any there, you basically got the license to print money. And that's why the Didis and the Lyfts and the Ubers have got such a huge valuation.
Well, except that doing away with that physical, carbon-based artificial intelligence and replacing him with a silicon-based is expensive today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not if you're running the car. Don't forget, if the driver's not in it, the car can, it's a bit like the airplane business, the car can be flying around 96% of the time instead of parking 96% of the time. So you drive the utilization way up, which basically if you change your business model then to a pay-per-use model, then you're in the digital scalable license to print money market. Okay.
Now I asked both of you gentlemen earlier today, is anybody kind of doing digital branding today? And basically, what's being, advertisements on TV, things of this nature in Europe in particular. Because I could say there's a little bit of that in the US, and for me, the manifestation of that would be using vehicle data to make driving safer or greener, avoiding collisions, things like this. But that's sort of an analog digital branding. But both of you said nobody really is doing in Europe. But
I think there are good examples, but I would like to sort of widen the definition of digital branding. To me, digital branding is really moving away from sort of the wholesale car business model and innovating and looking at other opportunities. And an example I'd like to bring up is thinking about electric cars. I mean, range is an issue when it comes to electric cars, and there are various ways of solving that. So, for example, looking at Care by Volvo cars, it's a combination of, now they have it for the XC40, then so you can sort of subscribe to a car, you get the car, but you also get their part of their car sharing offering.
I believe, by the way, Volkswagen has adopted the deliver to my car model.
In-car delivery, yeah, that's something else.
Quite an endorsement, but anyway.
Let's think about range excite. One aspect would be to sort of build out the sort of supercharger network, for example, across the globe. But let's say, looking at normal use cases for a car, a lot of people, they own their car, they drive back and forth to work, and then sometimes they go on longer trips. And people don't want to give up the longer trips, of course. But let's say you want to be able to accommodate all of these use cases, but that person wants an electric car. One solution is, of course, the supercharger network. Another solution is just bundle the electric car with car sharing, so that for those specific trips, well, use an ICE car. So, I mean, there are various ways of addressing...
BMW did something similar in the US, right?
Yeah. I think what you're talking about, though, is basically you're breaking down again this one customer owning one car model.
Exactly.
What people tend to do, and Americans are very good at it, is buying a car for the worst extreme use case. So they all drive around in SUVs for the 2 days they go camping. If you've got access to mobility or choice, actually they're probably going to use a slightly different car, because the SUV really really fits their lifestyle. So I don't underestimate the power of this breaking down the ownership model. And also don't estimate the power of humans aren't black and white. They're kind of hybrid. They like choice.
Yeah.
If you give them choice, they'll take it. And I think you're going to see that happen.
And the digital aspect is actually what enables that sort of those other options and other ownership models and being
So
able.
we talked about digital marketing and branding and so on. And that was my old job. But the slightly different thing about all these digital guys is you got one-click access to a customer, but you've also got one click and you've lost the customer. So that's also becomes a very tricky thing. So how do you actually tie in the customer into your digital ecosystem? And again, I'm come back to my favorite saying, make it a joy to stay and a pain to leave. And that's what you've got to work on.
So I want to share your thought earlier, by the way, before we get off this stage, but I'm going to come back to one more key theme here. But I love your comment, and you just associated with SUVs, but I think it works for BMW as well, which was, it's not a rational decision to own a BMW.
No.
which
is good. Which is good. That's what we live from.
Yes.
It's not rational to have the Rolls Royce as your fifth car either in the garage. So we're very, actually, to be honest, make myself unpopular here, but the OEM business tends to be very rational inside. It tends to be a German mechanical engineers. But the reason for buying the car for most people is a very emotional decision. It's not a rational German engineering kind of thinking.
So I'm going to turn it on its head. It would be rational to think about the car as a mobility subscription. Like, I have mobility needs, so I want a subscription, and that may be an everyday car, it may be an occasional SUV, it may be a BMW.
But again, back to the power of emotion. Don't underestimate the power of emotion.
That's what I mean. That's the challenge.
And that's what we all live from.
Yes.
And that's the real. And that's why I think it's going to be slightly different from the way the telecoms market kind of played out. People there are very few products that you get into that potentially can harm you quite a lot. You know, you don't climb into your washing machine, but you climb into a car, and you can't trust that car, and you want to have trust in the brand that's going to look after you. So there's more to just digital branding in the mobility business.
I might want to climb into the washing machine. I'm a little too big now, but the dryer, not the washing machine.
Okay.
But to your point, however, you could argue about cost of ownership and subscription models and make a lot of sense, but we're talking about an irrational purchasing decision, a very emotional decision. So that is the challenge. Is that the fundamental challenge of digital branding?
But luckily, mobility is slightly different. It's not black and white.
All right.
Totally different use cases. We heard about it. The guy lives in the middle of nowhere, got to get to the train station. The guy's got to come in from the morning from Garching into Munich, stop-start traffic all the way. The guy who's got to go through the congestion zone in London or drive through Paris. Not a lot of fun stuff to be done. But every now and again, when the sun shines in the Alps, it's great to get into the car and just enjoy the freedom of the road. So the use cases are completely different. But I would quite like, actually, my car to drive me into office in the morning, and I could have an extra hour's sleep in the car or do some emails or whatever, or eat my breakfast or drink my coffee.
So can we agree that digital branding is all about using platforms and technology to deliver a greater variety of driving experiences to attract a bigger base of users and audience?
I'll agree with that one.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right, and on that note, Annie, do we have any questions?
You actually have lots.
We actually have lots of questions.
So, do you want me to read some?
By all means, since it's behind. Oh, well, it's also in front here.
So one that I quite liked that came up, which role will the analog dealer play in a digital brand? The sales guy, is he obsolete? How are you going to motivate him?
He's going to become a digital dealer. It's quite obvious.
What does that mean?
He's already a digital dealer, to be honest with you. Yep.
Okay, well that's that one answered. So the top one really was, who is the owner of data collected? The driver OEM. How do OEMs monetize data, and how will the consumer benefit?
There's a whole bunch of different stuff. Tend to be who's providing the service and what are the AGBs, or your what you call commercial conditions. So, for example, I could talk about Drive Now as a good example. There are two different pots of data. There's a customer data, and there's car data. And the two don't come together.
Well, I'm going to say the catechism is the customer owns his data. Unfortunately, they can't get to their data generally, but BMW is working to solve this, and other car companies will follow with the data platform. But I think what needs to happen is a change in demonstrating how we can empower the customer by giving them access to their data and giving them control over their data. Yeah, that's my thought. Would you agree with that?
My take on the data issue is that currently OEMs, they have their brands, basically sort of build cars, sell cars. And for that to make sense, for customers to actually sort of sign over the usage of their data or allow OEMs to really use data in various ways, the OEMs need to come up with a credible story with regards to
But the customer can still have control,
value.
no?
Sorry?
But the customer can still have control.
The customer always has control, and especially in Europe with regards to sort of legal aspects and so on. But I think the key is really to provide the customer with a compelling story and vision of what the OEM is going to do with that data and how it's going to make the customer's life better. And until they come up with that story, I think data is going to be a big issue. But once that happens, I mean, we see in sort of social media and so on, I mean, people are happy to share pretty much anything if it's clear, well, it's not always clear, but if it's fairly clear how that is going to sort of provide value to them.
No more. Okay, no more questions.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I'm sure that if you have any questions during the coffee break, we'd be happy to take some outside. Well, thank you very much.